He looked like any other retiree mowing his lawn, but behind those suburban walls hid one of the darkest secrets in American history. Subscribe now, because sometimes the neighbor next door is the last person you'd ever suspect. The setup: California in the 1970s. Streets lined with fresh-built homes, children racing bicycles beneath cloudless skies, families settling into what seemed like the perfect suburban dream. But just as quickly as peace had arrived, fear began seeping into the quiet nights. At first, it was whispers, break-ins across Sacramento, a burglar who never stole much, rings, wallets, trinkets, but his precision unsettled police. He studied homes, left signs of surveillance, and seemed to enjoy stalking his prey. Soon, the crimes escalated. Women alone were targeted. Couples, too, found themselves bound and helpless. And what terrified the community most, he always vanished without a trace. Newspapers branded him the East Area Rapist. To the people of California, he became a living nightmare. Act 2. The Crimes. From 1976 to 1979, his pattern grew bolder. Families woke to the sound of footsteps, flashlights cutting through the dark. He tied husbands, placed dishes on their backs as makeshift alarms, and then turned his violence on the wives. Detectives realized they weren't dealing with a common criminal. This was someone who studied tactics, someone who relished fear itself. Then, suddenly, the violence escalated to murder. A couple in Santa Barbara, another in Orange County. The brutality left even hardened detectives shaken. By the early 1980s, investigators had a chilling realization. The East Area Rapist was also the killer haunting Southern California. Now, he was known as the original Night Stalker. Law enforcement poured resources into catching him. Tips flooded hotlines. Suspects were questioned, alibis checked, DNA compared. At one point, police thought he might be a military man. Others believed he could be law enforcement. But every lead dissolved into frustration. Evidence was collected, but technology lagged. DNA testing was in its infancy. Eyewitnesses described only a masked man with piercing eyes. As years turned into decades, the case grew cold. Entire task forces disbanded. Detectives retired, haunted by their failure. Families of victims waited, aging with unanswered questions. By the 1990s, the crimes had become legend. A faceless predator who disappeared into history. Then came a turning point. In the mid-2010s, investigators began using a new tool, genealogy DNA databases. They uploaded the Golden State Killer's genetic profile, not expecting much. But a match appeared, not to the killer, but to distant relatives. Piece by piece, detectives built family trees, trimming branches until one name stood out: Joseph James DeAngelo. Surveillance was ordered. Officers collected DNA from a discarded tissue. When the lab results came back, the match was absolute. After more than 40 years, the mask was finally ripped away. The man they arrested in April 2018 was no shadowy drifter. He wasn't a reclusive loner. He was a suburban grandfather, living quietly in a modest home. Neighbors described him as ordinary. He shopped at local stores, waved politely, even fixed things around his yard. The chilling twist: DeAngelo had once been a police officer. He had worn the badge, sworn to protect the very people he preyed upon. The predator who kept California in fear for decades had been hiding in plain sight, behind a uniform and later behind the mask of domestic normalcy. In 2020, DeAngelo stood before the court. Frail, hunched, whispering in a weak voice, he admitted to 13 murders and dozens of assaults. He escaped the death penalty but received life in prison without parole. For survivors and families, justice had finally arrived, though many admitted it came far too late. In court, one victim's voice rang out, "You no longer hide in shadows. We know who you are." The suburban grandfather was unmasked as one of America's most terrifying serial killers. Closing question. Engagement hook. Do you believe a man like DeAngelo ever truly leaves behind the monster inside? Or was he always waiting to strike again?